أهلا بيكم في بودكاست كلمني عن. النهاردة حلقة مختلفة من سيزن جديد، هنستضيف فيه ضيوف عشان نتكلم أكتر عن الصحة النفسية مع خبراء في مجالهم في الصحة النفسية. النهاردة ضيفي بيتكلم إنجليزي، فالحلقة هتكون باللغة الإنجليزية وهيكون في ترجمة أو subtitles باللغة العربية لباقي الحلقة. Today, I have Dr. Yasser Al Abbasi. He's the Executive Medical Director at Fehia in England, UK. They supply and deliver services, mental health services for addiction across country. And he's the Consultant Psychiatrist of the Year, awarded by the Royal College of Psychiatrists in UK in 2023. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madonna, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know that you're a consultant psychiatrist, but also you're very specialized with addictions.
Correct.
And when we say addictions or substance misuse, usually stigma comes in our mind. So I was wondering, through your career, what are the strategies or what can be effective ways to fight that, and why there's so much stigma around addictions?
Sure. Before I try and answer that, can I try this and you tell me if I've got this right or not? أنا اسمي الدكتور ياسر العباسي استشاري طب النفسي وإدمان.
That's amazing.
Perfect.
That's really, really well done.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So those who don't know me now, they know my introduction in Arabic.
Yes, indeed.
Stigma is a huge issue, both with mental health and it doubles up when it comes to addiction. And unfortunately, the stigma exists within the society. It prevails the society. It exists within family members, and it also exists within the health professionals as well. Sometimes mental illnesses are looked down upon, and particularly if they are due to substance misuse or when the person is addicted to something. They generally the feeling is, well, they've done this to themselves. Why should we help them? Why can't they just stop? And I always say to people that no one wakes up in the morning and then said, you know what, I'm going to be an addict. Never works that way. If they could, they would stop. They can't. That's why they don't stop. And that's why they need our support and our help. And that's why it's very important for us to try and reduce the barriers to accessing treatment. And there are a number of barriers to treatment. The first and the foremost is stigma. If we try and understand it in a model where we agree or we understand that it's a disease, it needs treatment, it needs psychological help, and they also need social support. Then we've come across the first hurdle. There's a long journey ahead of them, but stigma is the first barrier, and we all need to work together to knock down this barrier together.
Have you experienced any effective way in fighting stigma? I know that you have practiced across cultures, across countries. You have practiced in Middle East, you have practiced in UK, and I know that you have met people from all over the world. Have you noticed differences when we talk about stigma and fighting stigma in different cultural models?
It's an interesting question. I guess the baseline stigma remains the same across cultures. That's a very interesting phenomenon. And you'd see a similar kind of myths out there about why the illness happens and what we should be doing with them. There'll be a public perception, even in developed healthcare models in Western countries, there'll be a public perception that we're wasting our money in the health sector by trying to invest in the treatment of addiction.
Which is not the case. In fact, usually, and correct me if I'm wrong, they are young, they are fit.
Yes.
With treatment, we can gain a lot of force. So it's very cost effective. It can be expensive at some time, but when you save generations, you save young population from an illness,
Yes.
it will generate, because they can be part of the worker
The
public
workforce.
force. Yes,
Absolutely. I
exactly.
guess there's, again, very good point. There's always been evaluations of that, and they do economic evaluation. And not to sound very complex, they look at something known as the SROI, the social return of investment, right? So if I go out and I invest money somewhere, and I'm investing, let's say, £1, or I don't know, 4 dirhams, and in return of investing those 5 dirhams, I get 20 dirhams back. That's a great return. For 5 dirhams, I'm getting 20 dirhams back. So in studies, they've shown, and there've been very extensive economic evaluation, that for every British pound, £1 you invest, the social return of investment is £4. And this social return of investment includes the person becoming part of the society, reintegrating. They become part of the workforce. They stop committing crime. They become healthier and stop accessing health needs. They don't become unwell and end up spreading illnesses like hepatitis C and HIV. So all those are health burdens which eventually will have an overall impact on the health economy. So yes,
So
plus
it's everyone's responsibility.
everyone's responsibility, and helps everyone
Yes.
if the person is better. And it's not just for addiction. I mean, there's social return of investments for diabetes,
Yes.
for hypertension, for all illnesses. But it's important for us to understand, again, that's a disease which we need to address and treat.
And when we say a disease, usually diseases have reasons or causes. So can you tell us more about what can be the causes of someone to be using certain substance and kind of become dependent or become addicted to it?
Yes. For some illnesses, for example, physical health illnesses, you might see very clear causes. Like, for example, you've got an infection of your lungs, you've got pneumonia. You've been infected by a bacteria, and then you need antibiotics to treat that. Or you've got the appendix is a bit swollen, so you've got appendicitis, as they say, and then you need to operate and cut it out. For some illnesses, it's the overall understanding is unclear, and the treatment pathway is longer and not as clear cut. And it's not just in mental health and addiction. For example, multiple sclerosis is a very complicated illness. So just like that, there are multiple triggers. Some evidence suggests that you have familial history, so a genetic component. So genes can be responsible.
Can make people vulnerable, at least.
Can make people vulnerable, absolutely. I was about to say that
you can see people, same mates at college, try something, and one of them
goes towards
illness side, and one of them say, "Oh,
goes
I use
home
it."
happy.
Exactly. One way or another. So
There
there
you
is.
go. Yes. So yeah, there is, and even within the same families, you'd have siblings trying out drugs, and not everyone would be addicted to substances. So there's definitely a genetic component there, and then there are social triggers, kind of social environment you live in, the amount of exposure you have to these drugs, illegal, illicit drugs in particular. And then also your psychological makeup. So as you're growing up, if you grow up in dysfunctional families, or you grow up with a lot of psychological and physical trauma, emotional and physical trauma, you then have very bad coping mechanisms. And then sometimes this can be an escape. And initially it sounds like a good escape, but it ends up destroying your life, unfortunately.
Yes, and it's actually, I have to say, it's kind of a wake-up call to all of us, that no one wakes up in the morning saying, "Oh,
Correct.
I want to be an addict." That's not what's happening, and that's
Absolutely.
why we're here today, to understand more and help raising awareness, and maybe help also answering some questions in people's mind. And
Sure.
one of the things, the evidence is growing, and maybe it's an observation as well, that the age is going younger and younger. So the age of presentation is becoming even up to teens. Maybe, I don't know,
below teens. Yeah.
So
Even younger people
how
are
old
training.
was
Yeah.
your younger patient? The youngest?
The youngest I've seen, so we deliver services in the UK, both to adults and young persons, YP
Okay.
we call them. The youngest person we've seen, well, again, we can divide it into illicit drugs and legally available substances,
Yes.
like tobacco,
Okay.
right? Like
Yes.
vaping. So the youngest patient we've seen who was vaping immensely was 9 years old. And you can't buy a vape in the UK at that age. So the person was procuring it illegally.
So it has like the same, as you said, the kind of psychological makeup of trying to get it illegally and trying
Correct.
to, and that what would make it not just vaping, it
Correct.
would make it at this age.
Something that you're trying outside the norms
Yes.
of what you should be doing. Plus, I think the youngest patient I've seen using hardcore illegal drugs, this was street cannabis, was at the age of, I think, 11 or 12.
Okay,
So
yeah.
it can happen below teens as well. And unfortunately, what I've seen is, this goes back to the previous discussion we were having about what causes this. If your parents are using drugs, you
Okay.
end up living in a lower socioeconomic group, and then you end up living in an area where there's more drugs. So you hence start having what I call the triple whammy, which means you've got genetic predisposition, and so you're kind of liable. Then you live in an environment which is socially very triggering. Plus, then you've got a lot of psychological trauma. So all three kind of impacting you, and then ease of availability of street drugs. So you go out and you live in an area where everybody's trying to sell it to you.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So again, it's a responsibility of the community as well.
Correct.
The availability may be part.
Well, everything.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. You're right. I just wonder because now, with younger population, you have highlighted the role of the family and the environment around them. Does that translate into differences in intervention? Like early intervention at that age, is it the same as in adults or is it different?
So interventions of many types. So you try and intervene. Well, the best intervention is prevention. Yeah, prevention is better than cure, as the saying goes. So what you do is initially the awareness was targeted at a slightly older age, people in their teens or late teens, to stay away from drugs. But nowadays, because people get exposed to it at such an early age, you need to make sure that awareness is given out at an early age. People might be worried about that, saying, why are you telling a young child about drugs?
Exactly. Wouldn't be like
you're making
maybe
them-
making them
Yeah.
curious and wanting to use it.
Absolutely. But unfortunately, if you don't tell them, they'll find out from other sources. And where the sources they find out from are not reliable. They'll be finding out from friends and silly people who are using drugs, and someone saying, "Oh, you know what? It'll help you in your in your studies. Oh, it might help you with your depression, or you're having fights with your father or mom. Well, try this drug. This will make you feel better." So that kind of information is not right. So if you give them proper education, proper sourced awareness, right at a reasonable young age, not at 3 or 4,
Yeah.
but when you're kind of finishing up your primary school, you know you're going to secondary school, and that's when things start becoming a bit more complicated. It's at that time you want to do more awareness. In terms of treatment, the mainstay of psychological treatment remains the same. There are a number of psychological therapies we can use, so it wouldn't differ. But naturally, each therapy is individualized to the individual, to the patient.
Of course.
So for a younger person, there'll be a different approach, but the core therapy would be the same. We would try and avoid using medication for younger people, for the mere fact that they're very young, and you don't want to introduce too many chemicals, and you would only use them until it is absolutely necessary. So the treatment model doesn't change dramatically for children, but you have to be more careful, and it's catered for their needs at that age.
I see. And I can imagine if parents just found out that their child is vaping or smoking, right? It does. And imagine Middle Eastern parents.
I can imagine. Yeah. Yeah.
So again, I just wonder, what is the family role here? Because they are still children. So
Yes, of course.
families are the legal guardians. They
Yeah.
are part of it. Are they included when we talk about prevention and intervention?
Yeah.
Is it solely directed toward children and teenagers, or families can educate themselves?
So why I was smiling earlier was because I am a parent as well. I mean, I've got two lovely boys who drive me crazy every day. I feel like running out of the house. And I was thinking in my head, how would I react? Yeah, and then I was thinking, most probably I'll have a meltdown.
Yeah.
And again, everybody out there, it's a very difficult piece of information, finding out that your child, who you've looked after so much, you spent so much time trying to train them and do good things with them, you realize they're using drugs which can destroy their life. So your immediate gut reaction is to have an emotional outburst. You want to be angry, tell them off, lock them up. You want to protect them. And that parental instinct of protection will kick in. But you have to realize the protection has to be in the long run, not in the short run. It's a long journey and it's for the long game. So if you do try and lock them up, how long would you keep them locked up? If you do try and be strict, how many times can you tell them off? Eventually they'll grow up and they'll be their own person. Yeah, they'll be their own woman, their own man. And then if they've not really understood why they need to stop, then unfortunately they will end up using later on, even if you've tried stopping them at that age. So it has to be an engaging, interacting way in which you kind of address your children. You'd like to talk to them. You'd like to make sure you are able to communicate to them. You want to be sure you're boundaried, but you want to also make sure you're kind of telling them that you're there for them. You're able to listen. You're not judging them. You're the kind of place of peace. So if they feel you as a parent are judging them, where else would they go? So if they go to someone else, say I'm using drugs, they'll be judged. So if they come to you and they feel they're judged, they won't come to you. I'd rather have them come to me and talk to me and tell them, you know what, this has happened. And we're trying to help them and it didn't work. I want them to come back to me again. And I want them to tell me what's happened.
Right.
So that I am there for them. I'm still the anchor to help them. So yeah, parental education is an essential part. So the long end and the short end of the question and the answer was parental education, family education is essential in terms of trying to find the right treatment package for the family, for the individual. So families should be aware, they should be part of it. But what we want to do and avoid is what we call high expressed emotions, where everybody's becoming really, really emotional. Yeah, high expressed emotion means everybody is just having a meltdown, and someone's saying, "Oh, I'm going to have a heart attack if you keep on using drugs." The other person is saying, "Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that." So it has to be in a balanced way. It has to be in a way which helps the child come back to you.
That's really, really, really informative. And I have to say, it's important for all parents out there to realize that support is available.
Yes.
Treatments are available.
Yes.
So it's a moment that we might burn bridges forever.
Yes.
Or, as you said, we can be the anchors, knowing that we're not alone.
Correct.
There are systems and services and help and support is available out there. I do wonder now, because you mentioned earlier about the focus in a study, and take this, it will help you with your depression, it will help you with focusing in the study. And as we move older to young adults,
Okay.
the main population, I think,
now we're moving forward now with age.
with age, with young adults, because what I see a lot, I would say, in my practice, and again, in the evidence, there is growing use of stimulants.
Isn't there? There's absolutely.
Right?
And this is all across the world. You see global trends, don't we? Yeah.
It is a global trend, and when you go and dig deeper, it can be merely because there are a lot, like we're asked to do a lot.
Yes.
Like,
there's a huge demand
a huge demand.
on the young person.
Yes, they need to finish deadlines in their final year of university, or deadlines at work, or a mom who needs to stay awake for babies.
Yes.
And
look after
and
them.
look after themselves and the baby, and like the societal pressure is a lot.
Yes.
But the burden also of what we know as comorbidity, or the burden of having other mental health struggles. Young age is the age where adulthood is the age where many of the vulnerability move from vulnerability to depression to major depressive disorder, or
Yes.
vulnerability to anxiety to be generalized anxiety disorder, post-traumatic distress disorder as well. And the world is living in unsettling situation,
moment,
of
yeah.
course, both politically, economically.
Geopolitical situation is quite, and it impacts you as well when you look at things happening around you. Absolutely.
So how do you see that, and what's your take on this?
So if I may say at the beginning, I think if you look at the society in general, you generally feel that there's a huge amount of pressure, particularly on women.
Yeah.
Of course, you agree.
Thank you for actually acknowledging that. It means a lot.
Immediately, Dr. Madonna says yes. So yes, no, but to be fair, there is, because they have to. Nowadays, a majority of the women are working, and not necessarily the working women, even the stay-at-home moms. There's a huge amount of pressure for them to do everything properly, perfectly. School drops, school pickups, lunch, dinners, looking their best. Pressure on self-image because of social media. Everybody's kind of, and then you get these little snippets of videos where the mom is creating these lovely lunch boxes for children and looking perfectly while she's doing it.
Yes.
And you say, oh, and everybody thinks that can be done. And social media is very deceiving, exceptionally deceiving. And it's creating these unnecessary stereotypes out there. And then those who then work as well, so that you have to perform at work, you have to come back. And unfortunately, not in every household you'll have people taking equal share of the household chores. So it's on the woman to then look after the house and do everything else.
Also, you're saying men should help.
I'm not saying anything at the moment. Yes, of course. They should be an equal partnership.
Yes.
That's what marriage is about. That's what living together is about. Please, men, do not go out there and try and ban me.
But I wonder that this, like, did you see more trend in women now using stimulants or using certain type of substance of use?
So, the reason why I was saying that was I was coming to the point where, yes, so we were seeing from around the COVID pandemic, a slight, well, not slight, a bit of an increase in the consumption of substances within the female gender, both drugs and alcohol. Again, majority of the data is driven from the Western countries like Europe and the US. And we need to kind of find out more prevalence data within the Asian region and the Middle East. But there's a global trend of increase. And we're not going to go into the reasons, but there is a global trend of increase. And then you go back to the original discussion of about young adults who are in the teens, late teens, who are in school and being exposed to all these pressures of life, where there's more in school to do, then you need to do more sports. You need to be a top performer in everything. And then on top of that, you have to be socially cool and be accepted. And all these are pressures which are very challenging. They're not easy to deal. They're not easy to deal as a person of my age. I'm not very old, but yeah. So it does have an impact. Not saying that this would lead to drug use, but this is one of the factors of many factors which can possibly trigger someone into using. So again, we need to be realistic about everything. after so many years of working very hard and all that kind of stuff, you kind of I've come to a stage where I kind of feel, you know what, we're all human beings. We have so many hours in the day. We have to sleep, eat, and we have to do so many other things. So if something is doable, it's doable. If it isn't, then khalas.
It is what it is.
It is what it
خلاص.
is.
I love how you use that word.